Okay, so we're ready to go live. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Saleem, and I am the director at Liberty Books. Welcome to a very special edition of Meet the Author with Joe Foster. Joe is the founder of Reebok, one of the world's leading and largest sportswear brands, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show. We'll be discussing his new book. It's an excellent read. It's called Shoemaker, and it's currently available at all our bookshops and also online at libertybooks.com. So if you enjoy today's session and if you like what we're discussing, please go out and buy a copy, and don't forget to wear a mask while you do. So before we bring Joe on board, we have a small video, a tribute to Joe and his hard work in establishing Reebok as a global brand. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Saleem. Very nice. Nice opening. Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Good.
And I'm going to dive right in with a staple question.
Okay.
How did the book come about, and what was the experience like of going back in history and putting it together?
Well, there are a number of reasons really why I decided to write the book. A lot of people have said, Joe, you need to write your book. You need to write your book. And I said, okay, well, and put that off. But we now have the internet, we have Wikipedia, and we have a lot of people saying things about Reebok, how it happened, where it came from. And they're all wrong. A lot of people thought that as my grandfather started his business, J.W. Foster, which when he had two sons became J.W. Foster and Sons, they thought we just took over the company and changed the name. But there's a whole story there because that didn't happen. So it was good though to really take this story back to my grandfather. He was quite a genius. So it dawned on me, well, why don't we write the story? And then people will know it's not just Reebok. When did Reebok start? In the middle of the 20th century? No, it's a family, and the family business that started way back in 1895. So that's how it came about rewriting the book. But it took a few years, I can tell you.
By the way, how is your book different from Shoe Dog, which was written by Phil Knight of Nike? I'm sure you know about that book as well. I mean, in terms of your story and your background, how is it different from the way Nike came into being?
There's actually a lot of similarities in a way. Phil Knight was working out of a garage, but he was importing shoes. We were actually manufacturers, so we're different. We were making our shoes. We both ended up in the same place, and that's in the Far East, where we could get the right price, because that was so important as we developed in order to build a brand which would be able to do volume. We had to be able to get to the right price. But we were a family, a shoemaking family. My grandfather started life as a cobbler. By the age of 15 in 1895, he made himself a pair of running spikes, which in those days was very unusual. Are we different? Yes, we come from a shoemaking factory family, whereas Phil Knight, of course, he was a runner. He was interested in running, and
he was a runner. Okay.
Yes, he was a runner. I believe he was quite a decent runner as well. Probably not international standard, but I think he had a good standard, and he had a very good coach. Because if you do know anything about Nike, you know that it was Bill Borman who was the coach in Oregon there that joined with him to form the company.
So Joe, when I went through your book, and I mean, I finished it in about 6 or 7 days. I mean, I was hooked the moment I started it. So when I read the chapter America on my mind, and I think this was the time when you were trying to find distribution in the US. It was a period of struggle for you, because there were some wins and then there's some losses over there. So I get the feeling that you really enjoyed your journey of building Reebok. Can you tell me, as a business owner, how important is it to have fun and really enjoy what you're doing while you're trying to reach your goals?
Oh, it's absolutely well. You must enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, you will never be successful, because there are many times when you get up in the morning to enjoy that day, but sometimes it's not enjoyable. Things happen, and you have to face problems and get through them. But we used to have meetings in America to sit down there and say, what are the 3 most important things in business? And I would always answer fun, fun, and fun. Because if you're not having fun, then it's desperately difficult. And yes, going to America, well, we had a nice business in the UK, but by the time Jeff and myself became manufacturers and started to do our own company, football, which is the big volume trade in the UK, football, that was taken by Adidas. And we didn't feel that we could make much inroads there. So athletics had to be. But really, the big market for athletics, even when we started, was America. Because of the college and the universities, they had coach. Coach was God. And so if you went over there, we would sell volumes. We knew there was volumes there. And going to America was essential for me. And my first trip was 1968. But it was 1979. Before I actually found a distributor that worked, before I put it together. 6 of them had failed. And they failed, I mean, they failed for different reasons. Number one, if you've not got enough finance, it's difficult, because you need to be able to get the volume into the country, into America. It's a big country. The potential sales are tremendous. So there has to be sufficient money. But really what I did find is that we needed a key, because on my first trip, lots of people wanted to buy the shoes. We'll stock your shoes. Where do we buy them? And I said, in England. And he said, is that New England? No. England, that's across the water. They weren't prepared for that. The American market wasn't prepared for having to import the shoes and go through that problem. So I needed to get a hook. I needed to be able to say, well, how can I get a distributor and that distributor have a market? And that came about with Runner's World magazine. I don't know if you heard of Runner's World magazine.
Yes, I have.
In the
your book as well.
That's right. In the 1970s, it became the Bible. That everybody, suddenly running became something big. Everybody was out running. It's simple. All you needed was a pair of shoes and a pair of shorts, and you could go out there and you could do something and get fit. So
correct me if I'm wrong. One of the turning points for you in the US was the freestyle shoe, which you designed for women, and it was specifically targeted towards the aerobics audience.
Well, yes. I mean, that came later. The first thing was to get into the market. We got into the market by Runner's World started to rate the shoes, and there was such much influence that if you were number one running shoe, you could never produce enough shoes for that market. And by the time you did get enough shoes, it was time again for a new rating. So the retail trade just hated it. They just hated that thing because they could never get the shoes, and then they were left with the shoes once a new shoe came in. So he changed it. Bob Anderson, who was the editor, changed the system to a star rating, and 5 stars was the best going down. And I realized we needed to get a 5-star shoe, because if we got a 5-star shoe, and there could be 3 or 4, we would then have the hook. People would want the shoe, which would make it that if we could get a distributor and people wanted the shoe, then that would be great. And it was 1979. I met Paul Fireman before we got the 5 stars. But running was growing so fast then that we had a lot of people interested. Kmart were interested. They wanted 25,000 pairs, but they wanted a better price. So we're faced with 2 problems. One, we needed more production to solve the numbers. And number 2, we needed a better price. And we could get those in the Far East. I could get some production in the UK from Bata, which I did do. But it was in the August of 1979 when the Shoe Rating magazine came out. And I telephoned Paul Fireman and said, Paul, go get one of these magazines from the stand. I'm sure it's out today. And he went, and it was about an hour later, he came back and he said, Joe, Aztec, 5 stars. Brilliant. That was it. That was our key. But not only did Aztec, we put 3 shoes in. One was a running spike and another one was a racing shoe, as well as Aztec, which was our
all of them got 5 stars.
Yeah. And they all got 5 stars. So that opened the door. That brought us into the vision of the Americans as a running company. And of course, we're doing really well with running. And then, of course, Paul had a lot of reps all around the country, and we had a technical rep down in Los Angeles, and it was Arnold Martinez, who, well, he really found aerobics, because his wife, Frankie was going to these aerobic classes with her girlfriends, and they were coming back and they were full of it. Great, wonderful. And we say, well, what is this aerobics? Well, it's exercise to music, right? So Arnold was so interested that he decided he better have a look at this. And he went down there, saw the instructor was wearing tennis shoes. Half the class were wearing tennis shoes, the other half no shoes. And it struck him, why don't we make a shoe specifically for aerobics? And it was made from glove leather. It had a few problems to begin with, but they loved it. And it was there in Los Angeles, it was there in Hollywood, and you've got Jane Fonda and others suddenly picked this up. And suddenly, Reebok, as against Nike and Adidas, they were known as male sweaty. Reebok, we were just making our way in running, but only in the running area. So we were not known that well, really. And all of a sudden, we became this women's shoe. And we became a women's company. And that took the company, well, massive numbers.
So that brings me to my next question. How much of a role have influencers and mainly sportsmen played in terms of pushing the sales of your products? Because I've read from the time that your granddad operated J.W. Foster and Sons in the 1900s, you were always using sportsmen and racers to sort of promote your shoes. So how much has that helped in building the Reebok brand?
Well, I think there's no other way. It is the best way of marketing your product. And obviously, grandfather discovered that way back, right in the early. Yes, well, I mean, he was giving shoes to athletes so that they would use them. And he had world records in 1904. But in the 1920s, that was his belle epoque. That's where Fosters were almost supplying every athlete at the Olympic Games. And I don't know if you heard the film Chariots of Fire.
Of course.
Yes, well, Chariots of Fire, that was Harold Abrahams, Eric Liddell, and Lloyd Burley. And they were immortalized in that film. But he supplied all 3. They all wore Fastest shoes when they won the gold medals. So he knew how to influence. But in his day, you were influencing other performers. Today, influence has now gone street. Sport is influencing sport. Footwear is influencing everything on the street now. And influencers, yes, they are the most important way, or the best way to promote your product. I know other people, and I've discussed with other people, well, we can make you value for money shoes and do other things. No, one thing works, and that is having your shoes on people who can influence others.
Well, the other big turning point was when it was worn in Aliens, the movie. One
Oh,
of
yes.
your worn in Aliens.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
correct. Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing took off down in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and all the stars started wearing them. Girls were wearing these shoes all the time. Even if it was just going to work, they would put their heels in a bag and put their comfortable shoes on, and that was it. So Reebok became everything. Reebok became street. Like we had Sybil Shepherd. She was at the Emmys with orange high tops, and that sort of influence was absolutely incredible. And we also, because it was down there, where the acquaintance of Wendell Niles. Wendell Niles was an impresario like his father, and he knew everybody. And he also knew Princess Grace when she was in films. And so he got us into Monte Carlo, doing a pro celebrity tennis. And all the celebrities used to love going over there. We have Frank Sinatra. In those days, there was Roger Moore and Sean Connery. They were all there. It was incredible. And this all came about because it happened in Hollywood.
So when I read your book, it talks a lot about family business and the kind of feuds that take place in a family business. First between your father and your Uncle Bill, and then between you and your father. And since there are many successful family-run businesses in Pakistan as well, and I think a lot of people would like this insight from you. What are the main challenges that you see of doing business with family?
Well, I don't know, because I'm sure there are many family businesses which succeed and work together very well. The feud, I don't know what the feud was. We've often thought about why did my uncle and father fall out? What was it that drove? After my grandfather died in 1933, they took over, but the control was in the hands of grandmother. And I think she kept them together for quite some time until she died. And then, for whatever reason, they just didn't speak, which was quite soul destroying, really, because Jeff and I, we both had to do national service. And we did national service for 2 years. And we were able to look at the world through different eyes. And we came back to see the foster business was failing. And we just couldn't get my father and uncle together. I had no real disagreement with my father. The problem is that he wouldn't listen, didn't listen, couldn't do anything. So I guess the problem with my father, when I had to go and I told him, look, we're leaving. And that, of course, didn't go down very well at all. In fact, he picked up a paper knife, a letter
You
opener.
talk about it in chapter 6 in the showdown. Yeah.
Yes, and it was like, this shouldn't be happening. But I mean, we're not the only family, because Adi Dassler and Rudy Dassler, they didn't get on together either. But I think, fortunately for them, Rudy decided to leave the Dassler family business, and he set up Puma. And the rivalry allowed Adidas and Puma to grow tremendously. I mean, they were such rivals that they weren't killing each other; they were killing the rest of the business. A lot of sports businesses around the world failed because they couldn't keep up with Adidas or Puma. But we had Adidas in our sights for a long time. In fact, we'd only been going in business for about 4 years when Adidas sent a letter. We had 2 stripes and a T-bar as our silhouette on the shoes, and they thought it infringed their 3 stripes. So they were threatening us with, and we were delighted. We're absolutely delighted. They come along. Well, we're worrying them already. We're worried about us. They so much so that they need to threaten us. So we changed them to the Vector, which some of these things, there's problems to begin with. We started life as Mercury Sportswear, but in 18 months we couldn't register the name, and so we went through the process of trying to register the name. And I actually found Reebok in a Webster's dictionary. And the Webster's dictionary, I had won. during the war in 1943 as an 8-year-old. I was only 8 and I won this dictionary. Why an American dictionary doing what? I have no idea. But in this, I did find, because I was looking through the letter R, and I found this Reebok, R-E-B-O-K, South African gazelle, small southern gazelle. Gazelle, that just sounded perfect. So that's, is it luck? What is it? We could have been talking about Mercury today, had Mercury been our name and we'd been successful with Mercury. We could have been talking Mercury. We could have had 2 straps and a T-bar, which probably not as exciting as the arrow shape that we have now. And so there are many stories, and it's the same with the Reebok we put into a window on the shoe.
Yes,
that all came about because I was driving a Saab car, and Saab they were sponsoring Sebastian Coe, who was very fair. But he was a Nike. He was a Nike runner. But it was really interesting that as you go through life, you meet problems. But I think you either have it or you develop the notion that problem is an opportunity.
Okay.
And in most of our cases, there became opportunities which changed and allowed the company to move forward in a different way.
So who would you say was your toughest competition when you were trying to build Reebok?
Who was the toughest competition? I don't think we looked at it as competition. I think what we looked at a market.
Okay.
As far as we were concerned, it was how do we convince the market to buy our shoes? Because, Adidas and Puma, they were probably the biggest opposition to us when we started. Nike hadn't even started that. Nike started much later. They started with the running boom in America. We started in '58. Must have been in the mid-'60s before Phil Knight got into run shoes. So I don't think we really viewed people as that we were competing against people. I think that what we wanted to do was to find the market and just make sure that people knew our product. And we also worked very closely with the market so that they not only would wear our product, but they valued it. So they knew the company, they valued our product. And that way, I think for many years, we were sort of punching above our weight. We were known far better than the volumes that we were selling. But eventually the volumes did come through once we got the American market.
You also talk about the obsession with building Reebok over the years, and that obsession got you a lot on the road. And perhaps you also ignored your family to a certain extent. So would you say that's the price a business owner or a hardworking CEO has to pay for building a company like Reebok, or can balance be found? Because you later on also regret it in the end chapters when your daughter is diagnosed with leukemia. You also have some sort of regret as far as that is concerned.
Well, there's a deep sadness when my brother died, because that was a very difficult time for the company. And when my daughter died, you don't expect your daughters or your children to die before you die. And so there is a sadness, and is the sadness because you were away working? I don't think so. It was, everybody has their life. And, the children, Kay spent some time with us for 12 months. We went to Monte Carlo. We did a lot of things that maybe if we hadn't have been successful, she wouldn't have been able to do. She spent time enjoying those 12 months. And it was a most difficult 12 months. But families do families. I think you're driven by the company, because you can't say, well, here's an opportunity, but I'm not going. When you're in business, and of course, as you mentioned earlier, it is fun. You do enjoy it, although sometimes you wonder why you're at 35,000 feet again. Why every other week am I flying somewhere? Today we have this medium now. We have computers. When I was building the company, we didn't have mobile telephones. We didn't have computers. Everything had to be done you could do certain things by telephone, but even the telephone was difficult in those days. We quite often when I was traveling, I had to book a call if I wanted to call back to England. I had to book it through reception, and it could take probably an hour. Sometimes it was the following day before I could get the call through. So you had to move, and to become global, it meant I had to travel. So
You had to be on the road all the time.
yes, I mean quite a lot of the time, and it was. I mean, at first I started selling shoes in sort of locally, just driving around in the car. But once that had finished, I was then flying because I had to go to America. And when I got into America, Paul Feynman, we decided, Paul, look after the USA, because we've talked about influencers. And for me, the USA market influences the rest of the world when it comes to sport. And so if we got really, really well in the United States, we would grow. And I said, I'll look after the rest of the world, which was probably something to say that, but I did. I then put distribution on in the rest of the world, and I was traveling a lot. And it was good fun. Until in the end, of course, the company got so big, and we were about $3.8 billion business at that time, that I was just taking a flight, being picked up at an airport by a limousine, going to the best hotels, sitting there and talking to people. Then I would get on another plane. The business had gone. The business now, it was run, the numbers were so big that you had accountants running and lawyers, all now in the company. So for me, the journey, the excitement of the journey had finished, and it was time to leave because the company had got so big.
So when you talk about expanding to different markets, I mean, Southeast Asia, the US, Europe, I mean, what were the three biggest personality traits that you looked for in a distributor when you would appoint a distributor?
Well, it's hard to say. I think what you needed was somebody who was involved, somebody who was involved in your sport. If there's somebody involved in sport, that was helpful. But it was also somebody I could get on with. I could sit down there and talk, and that is a personal feeling. That if you got those, even today, but for the fact that we have COVID, we would probably be on the road now, maybe in Switzerland or Italy or Germany, meeting up with the people that I did bring in as distributors, and they remain friends. And it's just beautiful to keep driving through some nice country. You know, Europe is beautiful. South Germany is nice. Italy and Switzerland, they're all beautiful places. So that's what we do. And it's these friends that I made that we now visit and sit down, have a nice glass of wine, and enjoy and talk over the past.
So when people read your book, I mean, when entrepreneurs read your book, when people in the footwear business read your book, what do you want them to take away from the book?
Well, I think they'll take away my story, but I think also the story is that Reebok, it's a company with overnight success that took 31 years. It's not easy. It takes time. You have to have an enormous amount of luck. And you go through some very difficult times, and I think that I hope that what people can read in it, that those difficult times are challenges. They're not the times when you stop and you worry. No, they're the times when you accelerate, when you put more effort into it, when you come up and do more, and you face that challenge. So if you can turn a challenge into an advantage, and a lot of things do that way. And I hope people reading the book can see that we did manage to turn things around, and it was better now. Some of the worst things that happened to us almost seem to have been planned. That they had to happen for us to take that next step and move on. And so I hope people will, when they read it, I hope they'll enjoy it. I hope they'll understand that that Reebok was part of the Foster family, and the Foster family goes back to, well, it probably goes back to mid-1850s 50s, something like that, 1860, when my grandfather's grandfather was repairing cricket boots, because that's where my grandfather picked up the notion of putting spikes in. And I know he'd seen his grandfather repairing cricket boots, and he'd asked him, why are the spikes in the bottom of his shoes? I wish they'd give him more grip. So I hope people take from the story that it's been a tradition. That it is a family business, but it also depends on people, and you've got to have the right people.
So who were the right people in your journey in building up Reebok? Some of the key people.
Well, of course, there's Paul Fireman. There is Stephen Rubin. Stephen Rubin eventually came in with the money. He was the man with the money. There was a man called John Willie Johnson, who was early in my life, who lent me machinery. I made friends with him because we went to auctions together. The shoe industry in the United Kingdom was closing down, and lots of places were in auctions. And I went to auctions with him, and he bought everything that was there. And I'd seen some machinery in his warehouse, and asked him, John, can I buy this? And he said, no. I said, can I rent it then? He said, no. Oh, he said, you can have it. Give it me back when you've done with it. So it's people like that you meet who it's not more, a lot more than just being business. You get a personal bonding, and many people that I came across when we had a big problem when our distributor went out of business. So many people just gave me orders. Well, can we make this for us? And so since our factory almost went down to about 25% at that time, and we had to lay off a lot of workers. But
yes, you mentioned that in the book. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Within a month, we had all these orders coming in, and I think that's because, you know, as you grow in business, you make a lot of friends, and you know, friends are people. It comes back to people. It's these people who help you.
What was I mean, you mentioned turning challenges into advantages. I mean, what was your biggest challenge in building Reebok? What would you say was the biggest challenge you faced and which you turned into an advantage?
Well, I mean, there are so many that we could say. When the distributor went out of business, as I say, I had to hire a van, drive down 100 miles, pick everything up, bring them back, and then we had to turn it. How do we sell these? So we went to all the schools, all the clubs, and we just told everybody we got all these shoes. And so we actually sold the product. At retail, we just sold our product, and that was a big challenge. But we sold everything, and we got more money for it than we did from the distributor. So it did turn out to be good for us. Had we not, we certainly would have, our cash flow would have gone, and I'm sure the bank would have decided that was enough. But you know, we just had to think our way through it. And so there were numerous ways that we would simple things like we had some leather, and it was heavily dyed, and the tannery had not washed out the excess dye, and we made shoes out of this, and runners, of course, certainly in the north of England, running across the country and it's wet. This dye had gone into the socks and the feet, and they were coming out with socks, all blue socks, and we had to apologize, sent them a new pair of socks. But the thing that I liked is that it was the people who would come back to me, the people who would complain. That was good. The people who didn't complain, that's the problem, because they probably wouldn't buy again. But the people who complained, we used to talk to them and make friends with them. And eventually they became agents. And they're the best ones, because they're the ones that would actually complain. So they were the best people, and they became our agents. So it's turning people around, turning something around, which could be a problem and was a bit of a problem. But anything that you come to in life, it's a matter of saying, well, there's the other side to it. can we make it work? And we did.
So I think we have a few minutes left, and I'll come to my last question. So in the age of pandemics and lockdowns, how do you see the sportswear business in general, and also retail? I mean, do you see more and more people buying online, or do you think once the vaccine is available, we'll go back to our conventional ways of buying, which is brick and mortar? Do you see it balancing out at some point? I mean, you've seen the best of both worlds. So you've seen the digital shift and you've seen brick and mortar as well. In your experience, how do you see things shaping up?
Well, things are changing now. We have technology, and this technology, we're talking to each other thousands of miles apart, and yeah, you can do this now. And buying online is here to stay. I think it definitely is here to stay. And yes, retail, city centres, more town centres. City centres will remain city centres, and they will be good. Retail will always be there. For a lot of people, that is entertainment. To go around and to shop is entertainment. It's part of their lives. So it won't all go to online shopping, but online it's good. It's a way now. Of course, you can get discount prices online as well. So I think online is going to continue growing. I don't think there's any doubt of that. Online is continuing growing. There will be certain elements of the street which will close down and never reopen. But service industries,
some of them will close down permanently.
Well, I think those will be a small shoe shop. People selling shoes, a small one. If that's all they're selling, some of these will close down. I think the bigger supermarkets and those type of people, they will remain open. And yes, some of the better shops. But I do see it changing. Life is changing. Things are changing rapidly. And with COVID, we now see that everybody now is shopping online. My book is online. It's those sort of things. You can get it from anywhere. But it's like you with Liberty Books. You've got stores. I mean, those stores. It's wonderful to go into a store and just to look at all the different books and titles and pick up something, which of course online you don't do, because online means you're trawling through a lot of work. You go online for the more specifics. You know what you want. You go online. You know where to get it. But and this is where retail will still be there, but it won't be. It won't be the same. In fact, I think if I remember now that books, I think Waterstones are in the UK, and I think
Yes.
I think they've had the best year for a long time.
How do you think a retailer can create a good mix of online and offline? I mean, what is your take on that with your experience? How can a good mix be formed?
Well, it's visibility, isn't it? It's you need that visibility of everything, and retail gives the visibility. That if you've got retail stores, there is a lot of visibility. People walk around, people see. And with bookstores, it's somewhere where you can go and you can meander around, pick things up, have a look, and become interested. And as I say, I think mainly online, when people want something specific and they know what they want, they can just go online and buy it. I don't think many people browse online. It's a bit too much difficult. But I think that retail has to do both.
Okay.
Retail has to have apart from having the visibility of going into a store, which is an experience. It's a three-dimensional experience, and it's something that we all like doing. But I think that now so much is done online, and there's so much we can do with computers that you have to have a retail side, and I suppose again with online you can actually push something that you need to sell. With retail, it's making the space to have something, because not many people really have that much space where they can make some big point of sale
Retail space is expensive as well.
Pardon?
Retail space is expensive as well.
It is, yes. Well, that was one of the problems when Kmart came and wanted 25,000 pairs. I knew that what would happen is that for every square meter they have, they need to make so much money out of that square meter. And if selling our shoes didn't make that, we'd be out. We wouldn't be selling shoes in the.
What was your strategy? I mean, was it more of selling to big shops like Kmart, or did you want to sell to more of a boutique like small shops? I mean, what was your strategy when you were distributing Reebok?
Well, the strategy for selling, as far as we were concerned, was really the consumer. The consumer is the one that you've got to sell to, because the retailer in most cases don't sell things; they just make things available to buy. It's the brands that sell them, and the end consumer is the target, and that's why using influencers. They will influence the people to buy, and then the retail trade is where do you buy it from? But yes, retail is here to stay. I think there's no question about it, and it's going to be a mix. But certainly, if I was in business now and in selling product, I'd certainly be online, and I'd certainly have an online shop, and it would be very convenient for people to buy online.
I think a lot of retailers will be happy to hear that retail isn't going anywhere.
Well, I mean, where does it go? There will be a slimming down, certainly. There will be a slimming down, and people who are struggling or were struggling before COVID, that will be it. For them, they will not get back again. But there was always the retail, yes. It's an occupation for some people. Some people just enjoy going out there and physically being able to touch the product. And it's a different experience receiving a parcel, but it's very nice to be able to go around the store and pick something up.
Of course, going to the store and seeing the product yourself, I mean, it's a totally different experience. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So we're at the end of our session, and we'll be taking some questions from the audience.
Fine.
Let's see if we have any questions.
How do you differentiate your brand from competitors? Is that koala?
How do you differentiate your brand from competitors? Yes, that's the question.
Well, I think in terms of sports footwear, it's the silhouette. We could see with Reebok silhouette that distinguishes it. It's what people see. It's not quite so easy for street shoes because it's just an ordinary shoe. But we were in the sports trade, and the way to sell the brand is to make it different. We know that Adidas have 3 stripes, that Nike have the swoosh, and Reebok has vector, and they're all recognizable. So making that more and more recognizable, and also the thing about shoes is they're quite small compared to the rest of apparel. So it's good to make apparel with your logo on. So that's how we would differentiate. Of course, if you can make something different technology-wise, although footwear itself is not really highly technical, but there are technological advances have been made. And we know now, you've seen this latest shoe from Nike, which is, I think the athlete, he broke the 2-hour mark for a marathon because the shoes have this different sole on it, a lot of rubber, a lot of sponge. So yeah, you differentiate as far as we're concerned in the sports footwear. It's the silhouette.
So let's see if we have another question.
Well, that's not a question. That's a statement. Thank you, Bear.
Which point in your career made you the proudest? This is Mohammed Arsalan Zia.
Yeah, man. Which part? I think the breaking into the American market, and when we got the 5 stars with our shoe, I think that was the one, because that I'd been going for years. I've been trying to get into the American market, so it was really fantastic to feel we'd made it, and we'd actually got that with our shoe. And that 5 stars, that definitely was proudest. Another proud moment, of course, is when Reebok became #1. When mid 80s, we had overtaken Adidas and overtaken Nike, and we became #1 sports company. I think that was also another proud moment. So, yes, when you have such success that Reebok had, there are so many proud moments, so many moments where you could say, yes, we did it.
So we have another question from Mevish Rizvi. How was advertising done, keeping in mind that the competitors had a strong focus on their marketing also?
Well, as we say, when we're talking about advertising, it's the question of, do we use influencers? The best advertising is to have somebody in your product, and somebody who's recognizable, somebody who wins. So influencers were always the best way. Otherwise, advertising was, you just had to advertise in things like Runner's World. It was just keeps your name up there in front of people. And being on the street, we had a terrific boost in our sales when in America we didn't have, in those early days, any point of sale. But what we did have, and it was Paul Feynman who said, Joe, can we use the Union Jack on the shoes? We said, and I knew that would give us a lot of problems back in the UK, but I said, okay, we'll do that. So we put the Union Jack on the shoe. But not only did we put it on the shoes, one on each shoe, we also had a box with a Union Jack lid. And when the sales started to really grow in America, no point of sales, but what they did was they stacked the shoe boxes with the Union Jack facing outwards, and the shoe stood on top like a pyramid. And that was incredible. It was really incredible. All these retailers just stacking the Reebok boxes up. So all you got were these Union Jacks. And I think you use agencies as we grew. Of course, we had agencies, and they would think of different ways of advertising in papers or television. And it's just something you have to do. But I still think there's nothing can beat having your shoes on people who are winning gold medals. So influencers, to me, have always been the best way.
So we have another question from Zaki Heather. Inspirational journey indeed. While you were growing up, did you feel the burning spirit of becoming an entrepreneur?
For me, really, it's you have to be young to be an entrepreneur. Because if you know too many of the answers to the questions that are going to come to you, you probably wouldn't start. But you start the journey and you take it step at a time. While you were growing up, I think is the answer while you're growing up as a person or growing up as a business. Growing up as a person, you don't think you're an entrepreneur. It's we all have ideas on what we might be doing. But did I think I'd be a shoemaker? Probably not. I needed to get until late teens to get into the business. But once you're in the business, it's a question of saying, for me, it was a question of saying, we've got to keep going forward. We learned from Foster's. My grandfather had a great vision, used influencers, and he grew his business nicely. But he had 2 sons who didn't. He either didn't tell them how to run the business, or they just didn't pick up on it, or it was too easy for them. But they didn't do anything. They didn't do any marketing. So I think what we learned is the fact that we know you've got to do marketing. You've got to push your product. You've got to do something. So when we started, right from the first day, it was necessary to sell your business. But whether I had a burning spirit, I don't know. I suppose really it's hard to say until after the event whether you had a burning spirit. Certainly, I found it necessary to travel. I found it necessary to look for individual people I could get to wear the shoes, and we would grow our business. So I don't know. I don't know. It's almost something that's in the nature.
So we have one question from Abdul Basit Ashrafi. At what point did you decide Adidas to let in, and how did that work? Was that something you wanted to do, or is it something you couldn't say no to?
Well, Abdul, you must realize that I retired from Reebok in 1989, at the end of 1989, and Adidas didn't come in and buy the business until 2005. So I was well out of the business by then. I think the Reebok business had plateaued. I think it was a bit stagnating, and I think that there was a need to change to get different management. I know that Adidas bought the company to improve Adidas's momentum in the USA, which it did. So from Adidas' point of view, yes, that was a good purchase. They didn't though put much energy into Reebok, and Reebok has stayed in that stagnation period. They have some good ideas now, and certainly they now have come back. I think we mentioned this earlier. They've come back to just the Reebok as it was many years ago, with the multiplicature of the drop bar and the vector. They did change to a delta, and I don't think that worked at all for Reebok. So I had nothing to do with that. Adidas was the choice, and I think Adidas are even considering selling now, because to develop Reebok would be to develop competition, and I think Reebok would grow very quickly with the right means, with the right way of looking at it again. And who knows? But I didn't have anything to do with Adidas. I think Adidas might stay hold of it, because I think it's now turning around a bit.
So let's see if we. So we have another question from Ubaidullah Khan. Is your book more about your personal life or business?
Oh, it's definitely business. I don't think there's much personal life in there or the personal life, it can really not be separated from the business. And the book was about my life with Reebok and building Reebok and the experiences of building Reebok. So it's not really that personal book, apart from the fact that it does really cover everything that was very personal to me, but really the business side of it.
Let's see if we have any more questions. So I think we're at the end of the session, and there aren't any more questions. There's one more from Omar Iftikhar. Okay, that's not a question, it's just a comment. We enjoyed the session. So thank you very much, Joe, for joining the session today. It was wonderful having you.
Yes, it's been a real pleasure. It is nice, because the one thing that's left for me at this moment of time is to get the Shoemaker book to become a #1.
Oh, we'll help you do that, hopefully.
Please do. Again, it's like making shoes. There's no point if you're making shoes and nobody wears them. There's no point in writing a book unless somebody's going to read it.
Absolutely.
And, yes, and I hope people enjoy it. We've had a lot of very good comments, which is indeed very encouraging. So,
well, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. Let's hope people who buy it from our shops and also online do enjoy it.
I hope so. I hope they enjoy it. And but if they can, I don't know if they'd learn something from it. I don't know if I'm a teacher. I think what they may be able to read into it is some of the things that I went through, our company went through, and it may help in terms of them doing their own business or living their lives.
I think the one thing that came across very evidently in the book was that if you have drive and passion, it's not impossible to achieve anything.
Well, I do. Yeah, I do agree. You can, if you've got to keep at it, though. You must be passionate. Yeah, you must be passionate, and you must be willing to continue when things don't seem so good. But
like you said, turning challenges into advantages.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And that can be quite rewarding. That you can feel quite good about that if you can really see the advantages that come from a problem.
So, Joe, once again, thank you very much for the session today, and thank you to the audience also for tuning in. Everyone, have a nice evening. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye. Let me just close off here.